I was staying at my friend Rebecca's place for the weekend. She was away on a trip with her family to celebrate her mother's birthday on the coast, but she had a small calico cat named Molly that was afraid of thunderstorms. This weekend, we were supposed to get a really bad one. The Weather Service had issued severe storm warnings for the entire county. Rebecca had asked if I could stay at her house to keep an eye on Molly, though the cat was very independent, usually just sitting alone in whichever room she felt like. "She'll mostly ignore you," Rebecca had said when handing me the keys on Thursday evening. "But during storms, she gets really skittish. Just being in the house with her helps." I didn't mind at all. Rebecca's house was a 2-story cedar cabin nestled in a densely wooded area about 15 miles outside town. The isolation appealed to me. No neighbors, no traffic noise, just the sounds of nature. The perfect writing retreat. I'd brought my laptop, planning to make progress on my novel while enjoying the solitude. It started storming the day before Rebecca left, and the weather report predicted it would continue throughout the whole weekend. Dark, heavy clouds had been gathering since dawn, casting premature shadows across the forest. By mid-morning, rain was coming down in thick sheets, drumming against the roof and windows. Occasional flashes of lightning illuminated the surrounding woods, followed by the low growl of thunder. This was on Saturday. I had spent Friday night there with no issues at all. Molly did fine with the storm, only hiding under the couch for a few minutes during the loudest thunderclaps. That morning I enjoyed relaxing on Rebecca's comfy leather couch and reading a thriller I'd picked up at the airport on my last business trip. The soft patter of rain against the windows and the occasional distant rumble of thunder created the perfect atmosphere for losing myself in the pages. I always loved staying at Rebecca's place because it was out in the woods. It felt so isolated and peaceful, miles from the nearest neighbor, surrounded by towering pines and oaks that swayed in the wind. The house itself was charming. Hand-hewn beams, stone fireplace, large windows that normally offered views of wildlife, but today only framed the blur of rain and wind-whipped branches. Molly had spent most of the morning curled up on the windowsill in the kitchen, her tail occasionally twitching as she watched raindrops race down the glass. I found her presence oddly comforting in the big, empty house. Around noon, I made myself a sandwich and settled back on the couch. The storm had intensified, with winds howling around the corners of the house and rain lashing horizontally against the windows. I pulled a blanket over my legs, savoring the contrast between the raging elements outside and the cozy warmth within. Midway through the day, a call came in on the home phone. This was back when those were a common thing, though Rebecca had kept hers mainly because cell reception out here was spotty at best. The sudden shrill ring cut through the white noise of the storm, making me jump. 3 rings, 4. The sound seemed to echo through the empty house. I checked in case it was Rebecca trying to reach me, but the caller ID said, "unknown number." Something about those 2 words on the little screen sent a slight chill down my spine. I didn't answer. Who would be calling on a landline during a storm like this? The ringing stopped and silence fell again, broken only by the drumming rain and occasional thunder. I tried to return to my book but found myself rereading the same paragraph multiple times, my concentration broken. A few minutes later, a call came through again. It said the same thing, unknown number. I watched the phone as it rang, 5 times, 6, 7. It rang out, but this time, a voice came through on the answering machine. Rebecca's cheerful, outgoing message played. "Hi, you've reached Rebecca Miller. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave a message and I'll call you back." Then came the beep, followed by silence. For a moment, I thought the caller had hung up. But then I heard it, a quiet, male voice. They just said one word, Rebecca's name, as if asking if she could hear him. "Rebecca?" The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was something in the tone that made the hair on my arms stand up. He then hung up after a couple seconds of silence, the machine recording the click and then the dial tone. I stared at the answering machine, its red light now blinking to indicate a saved message. The single word spoken by that unfamiliar voice seemed to hang in the air. Who was this person? Why were they calling? And why did they only say Rebecca's name? Thunder crashed directly overhead, making me flinch and knocking the power out for a brief second. The lights flickered, and the digital clock on the microwave reset itself, blinking 12 o'clock. Outside, the storm had turned the afternoon sky as dark as dusk, and rain pelted the windows with renewed fury. I didn't know if this was someone Rebecca was talking to or like a family member or something, so I just texted her to let her know that someone called the home phone. Reception out here was unreliable, but sometimes texts would go through when calls wouldn't. "Hey, someone called your landline. Left message just saying your name. Unknown number. Everything okay?" I sent the text, then set my phone down. I did find it strange that it came up as an unknown caller, though. Most people's numbers show up these days, even telemarketers. I tried to dismiss the unease settling in my stomach, telling myself it was probably nothing. Just a wrong number, or maybe one of Rebecca's relatives calling from a hotel or new phone. But as another flash of lightning illuminated the darkened woods outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching the house, watching me. I pulled the curtains closed and turned on a few more lights, trying to dispel the creeping shadows. Over the next 3 hours, 2 more calls came in from that same unknown number, but no more voice messages. Each time I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Each time, my unease grew a little deeper. The storm outside intensified, with wind now howling through the trees and rain driven sideways by powerful gusts. Occasionally, I heard the crack of branches falling in the woods. My friend never responded to my text. I guessed they were pretty busy with family celebrations, possibly in an area with even worse reception than here. Or maybe she'd seen it but didn't think it was important enough to reply to. Still, her silence added to my growing discomfort. I didn't worry myself about it, though. I figured it was nothing. I tried to rationalize it. Probably a telemarketer with a weird approach, or someone who dialed the wrong number and was confused. Maybe even a prank call. The isolation that had seemed so appealing earlier now felt oppressive, as if the woods and the storm were conspiring to cut me off from the rest of the world. To distract myself, I made food, pasta with the marinara sauce I found in Rebecca's fridge, and really spent the rest of the day not doing much of anything. I tried to work on my novel but couldn't focus. Instead, I paced the house, checking locks on windows and doors, drawing curtains closed, and flinching at every unusual sound. As afternoon faded into evening, the storm showed no signs of letting up. If anything, it grew more intense. The electricity flickered several times, making me wonder if I should locate candles and flashlights in case of a prolonged outage. The thought of being in this isolated house in total darkness with only the storm and my imagination for company wasn't appealing. I found Molly curled up under Rebecca's bed, her eyes wide and pupils dilated. The poor thing trembled with each thunderclap. I coaxed her out with some treats and stroked her fur, finding comfort in the warm, living creature. She followed me downstairs, staying unusually close to my heels. "It's just a storm, Molly," I said aloud, my voice sounding strangely small in the empty house. "Nothing to worry about." Later, say around 8 or 9, I found a movie to watch upstairs in the bedroom. I needed something to occupy my mind, to drown out both the storm and my own uneasiness. Rebecca had a small TV mounted on her wall, and I scrolled through Netflix until I found a romantic comedy. Lighthearted, predictable, safe. I got about halfway through it before remembering to check on Molly and make sure she had food and water. The movie hadn't really captured my attention anyway. I kept finding my eyes drawn to the windows, to the shadows in the corners of the room, to the closed bedroom door. I paused the movie and headed downstairs. The staircase creaked under my weight, each step loud in the quiet house. The storm had settled into a steady, heavy rain. The earlier fury of wind and thunder temporarily abated. This brief respite somehow made the house feel even more isolated, as if we were in the eye of the hurricane, a false calm before the next onslaught. I was confused to see Molly standing right at the front door, staring at the crack in the doorway like she was waiting for it to open. Her body was tense, tail straight and slightly puffed up, ears forward in alert attention. She seemed frozen there, as if listening for something I couldn't hear. I called her name and she looked at me, but only for a moment before looking back at the door. It kind of creeped me out, if I'm being honest. Animals sense things we don't. Isn't that what they always say in horror movies? The thought made me shiver despite the warmth of the house. "What do you see, Molly?" I whispered, not even sure why I was keeping my voice down. Was it because I didn't want to be heard by, "What? Who?" I walked up to the door and hesitantly looked out the peephole at the porch. The glass had fogged up from all the rain, so everything was blurry, and the darkness outside didn't help. The porch light was on, casting a yellow glow over the wooden boards, but beyond that was impenetrable blackness. The night and the woods and the storm all merged into one dark void. I couldn't really make out anything at first. The rain distorted everything, creating moving shadows and shapes that dissolved as quickly as they formed. But then something moved, enough for me to tell there was something, or someone, standing on the other side of the porch. My heart skipped a beat. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, squinting through the peephole. Was it just a branch moving in the wind? A trick of light and shadow? Or was someone actually out there, in this storm, on this isolated porch, watching the house? I felt a little unsettled, but I continued to watch, trying to get a clearer view of what I was seeing. I really wanted to know for sure if there was someone out there, but I also didn't want to open the door if there was. My palms were sweating, and I wiped them on my jeans before returning my eye to the peephole. 2 to 3 minutes went by without any changes in what I could see. I thought I was just scaring myself for no reason. After all, if someone was out there, they would have knocked on the door by now. They wouldn't just stand in the pouring rain. It was probably just a shadow from the porch furniture or a hanging plant moving in the wind. Still, I double-checked that the deadbolt was secure and the chain was in place. The action felt silly. I was jumping at shadows, letting the storm and the strange phone calls get to me. This wasn't like me at all. I've always prided myself on being practical, level-headed. I left the door to go check on Molly's food and water and grab myself some snacks for the movie. The cat food bowl was still half full, and her water dish needed only a slight top-up. As I reached into the cabinet for some chips, the phone rang again. I froze, hands suspended in midair, as the shrill tone cut through the house. Unknown number. Again. I let it ring, watching the phone as if it might suddenly transform into something else. After 6 rings, the answering machine kicked in. Rebecca's cheerful message. The beep. Then silence. No voice this time. No word spoken, just the soft sound of someone breathing. In, out, in, out. For 10 long seconds before the line clicked dead. My appetite gone, I abandoned the snack quest and hurried back toward the stairs. When I passed by the door again, Molly wasn't there anymore. A momentary relief washed over me. If the cat wasn't concerned, maybe there was nothing to worry about after all. But something made me look out just to double-check. Through the peephole, something looked different. It was still fogged up and blurry, but one of the shapes I saw wasn't there anymore, like it just disappeared. Was there really someone standing there the whole time? Had they moved, gone away, or moved closer to the house, out of the limited view the peephole provided? The phone rang again. I jumped, a small cry escaping my lips. This time, I didn't even look at it. I knew what it would say. Unknown number. I hurried up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time, Molly suddenly appearing from somewhere and racing up ahead of me. Feeling off about everything, I picked Molly up and brought her to the bedroom with me. Her little heart was racing as fast as mine. I closed the bedroom door behind us, then, after a moment's hesitation, locked it. The simple action made me feel both safer and more afraid. Safer because of the barrier. More afraid because locking the door meant admitting I believed there was something to lock out. I turned the movie back on and sat on the bed, Molly curled against my side. The romantic comedy continued playing, the characters laughing and flirting and dealing with comical misunderstandings. It all seemed so trivial, so distant from the growing sense of dread I was feeling. I turned the volume up, hoping the dialogue would drown out any sounds from elsewhere in the house. The whole time the movie was playing, I couldn't shake a really unsettling feeling I had. Every few minutes, my eyes would dart to the bedroom door, or to the window where rain continued to lash against the glass. I kept imagining I heard footsteps on the stairs, or the creak of a floorboard, or the click of a door opening. But each time I muted the TV to listen, there was nothing but the storm. My phone was lying on the nightstand. I picked it up and checked. Still no response from Rebecca. I debated calling her but didn't want to disturb her family celebration for what was probably nothing. Instead, I texted again. Hey, got more calls from that unknown number. Just breathing this time. Probably nothing but getting a little creeped out in your house alone. Call when you can. I sent it, knowing it probably wouldn't go through right away given the storm and the spotty reception. As I set the phone down, I noticed it was almost 10 p.m. The evening had slipped away faster than I'd realized, dark hours passing while I jumped at shadows and unknown callers. Outside, the storm had found its second wind. Wind howled around the eaves, and rain drummed against the roof with renewed vigor. A flash of lightning lit up the room, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very foundations of the house. The lights flickered, dimmed, then came back to full brightness. Molly tensed against me, her claws digging into my thigh through my jeans. I stroked her automatically, murmuring reassurances I didn't feel. The TV continued playing, the happy couple now running through rain toward shelter, a mocking echo of the real storm raging outside. 30 minutes went by, the movie approaching its predictable happy ending. My nerves had begun to settle somewhat. The consistent rhythm of the rain became almost hypnotic, lulling me into a false sense of security. Maybe I really had been imagining things. Maybe the calls were just a weird coincidence. The shape on the porch, nothing but shadows and wishful thinking. Suddenly, Molly jumped off the bed and walked up to the bedroom door. She didn't scratch at it or look back at me like she wanted to go out. She just stared at the crack in the doorway, exactly the same as she did at the front door, like someone was out there. Her body was rigid, tail slightly puffed, ears perked forward in intense concentration. My heart immediately started racing. All the calm I'd managed to build instantly shattered. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. I called her name in a shaky voice, but her focus was locked on the door. In movies, this is when the foolish protagonist calls out, "Hello? Is anyone there?" But I knew better. If someone was out there, I didn't want them to know I was aware of their presence. I wanted the element of surprise, however slight. I muted the TV, plunging the room into near silence. Now all I could hear was the rain, my own shallow breathing, and the blood pounding in my ears. I strained to listen for any sound from the hallway. A footstep, a breath, the rustle of clothing. Nothing. But Molly remained fixated on the door, her attention unwavering. I got up from the bed and quietly walked over, careful to avoid the spots in the floor I knew would creak. The short distance from bed to door felt like miles, each step requiring enormous effort. When I reached the door, I stood beside Molly, who didn't acknowledge my presence. Then I leaned my ear against the door, holding my breath to better hear. I couldn't hear anything. The wood was thick, solid core, good for privacy, but now frustrating my attempts to detect what had Molly so alert. I then crouched down and peered under the crack between the floor. At first I saw nothing, just the darkness of the hallway beyond. Then, as my eyes adjusted, I made out something that shouldn't be there. Two shadows, darker than the surrounding darkness, perfectly still, perfectly positioned on either side of the door. My whole body aggressively shot back, a gasp escaping before I could stifle it. There was someone standing right outside the door, just a couple inches away. Not someone, two people. Two people standing silently outside my bedroom door in an isolated house during a storm. A bolt of terror shot through me, so intense I felt momentarily paralyzed. My eyes immediately looked at the doorknob. I had never even locked it. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Anyone could turn that knob and walk right in. I lunged forward, fingers fumbling with the lock. I snapped the lock down, and almost right away, the person on the other side ran away from the door. No pretense now. I could clearly hear rapid footsteps, not one person, but two, moving quickly down the hallway toward the stairs. They went downstairs, where I could no longer hear anything over the storm. I backed away from the door, retreating to the far corner of the room, pulling Molly with me. My phone. I needed my phone. It was still on the nightstand, seemingly miles away in my panic. I forced myself to move, keeping my eyes on the door as I sidled along the wall to the nightstand. My fingers closed around the phone, and I clutched it to my chest like a lifeline. Who to call? Police, obviously. But would they even come out here in this storm for what they might dismiss as an overactive imagination? Yes, they would. Because this wasn't imagination. Someone was in the house. Two someones. And they had been standing outside my door, silent, watching, waiting. With trembling fingers, I dialed 911. 911. What's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional, a stark contrast to my own panicked breathing. There's someone in the house, I whispered, afraid of being overheard even through the locked door. I'm staying at my friend's house, and there are people inside. They were outside my bedroom door just now. Are you safe at the moment? She asked. I locked the bedroom door, but I don't know if that will stop them. They ran downstairs when I locked it. I can't hear them anymore. What's the address? I gave her Rebecca's address, then clarified. It's the Cedar House, about half a mile down the dirt road. There are no neighbors nearby. Okay, I'm dispatching officers now, she said. Can you stay on the line with me until they arrive? Yes, I breathed, relief washing through me at the promise of help. How long will they take? Given the weather and your location, probably about 20 minutes. Do you have somewhere secure you can wait? Can you barricade the door? 20 minutes. It seemed like an eternity. I looked around the room, assessing. I'm in the bedroom with the door locked. I can push the dresser in front of it. That's good. Do that if you can do so quietly. Are you alone in the house except for the intruders? My friend's cat is with me. My friend is away for the weekend. As I spoke, I moved quietly to the heavy oak dresser and began to inch it toward the door. It was massive, solid wood, and even sliding it made more noise than I was comfortable with. Do you know how many intruders there are? Have you seen them? I think 2. I saw shadows under the door, 2 pairs of feet. They ran when I locked the door. Do you have any weapons in the room with you? I looked around wildly. No. Wait, there's a heavy lamp. And scissors on the desk. Those will work. Stay away from the door and windows. Find a place out of sight where you can wait. As I grabbed the scissors from Rebecca's desk, a new sound reached my ears, a creaking on the stairs. They were coming back up. They're coming back, I whispered, fear making my voice shake. I can hear them on the stairs. Stay calm, the dispatcher said, though I detected a new urgency in her tone. Officers are en route. Make sure your door is secure and stay quiet. I finished pushing the dresser against the door, creating a barricade that would at least slow them down. Then, I retreated to the attached bathroom, scissors clutched in one hand, phone in the other. Molly followed me, her body low to the ground, tail thrashing with agitation. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, then moved slowly down the hallway, not trying to be silent anymore. They wanted me to hear them coming. A psychological tactic to increase my fear. It was working. They stopped outside the bedroom door. I held my breath, straining to hear over the storm and my pounding heart. A soft knock on the door made me flinch. We know you're in there. A man's voice, the same one from the answering machine, soft, almost gentle, but with an undercurrent that sent ice through my veins. We just want to talk to Rebecca. Is she in there with you? I said nothing, pressing the phone tighter to my ear. The dispatcher had gone quiet too, probably recording everything. We've been watching this house, the voice continued. We know Rebecca lives here. We need to speak with her. It's important. Still, I remained silent. The doorknob rattled, tested. The police are on their way, I finally called out, trying to make my voice sound strong and confident. You should leave now before they get here. A pause, then a different voice, also male but harsher, with a rasp like sandpaper. She's lying. There's no way she called police. Phones don't work out here during storms. I'm on the phone with them right now, I said. They've got the address, and they're coming. Last chance to leave. Another pause, longer this time. I could imagine them conferring in whispers, debating whether to believe me. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time, the door shaking in its frame. She's locked it, the first voice said. Break it down, said the second. My heart nearly stopped. The dresser would slow them, but If they were determined enough, they could get through. I looked around the bathroom for additional barriers but found nothing substantial. A heavy thud against the door, the sound of wood groaning. Another thud. The dresser scraped an inch across the floor. "Officers are 10 minutes out," the dispatcher said in my ear. "Is there a window in the room you can escape through?" I glanced at the bedroom window. Second story with no convenient tree or trellis nearby. "It's too high," I whispered. "And I don't want to leave Molly." Another crash against the door. The dresser moved another few inches. "We just want to talk," called the gentle voice, though his actions belied his words. "Rebecca has something that belongs to us. We need it back." What could Rebecca possibly have that would drive these men to break into her house during a storm? To stalk her, call her, and now try to break down her door? Whatever it was, I was certain talking wasn't their only intention. The storm chose that moment to intensify, a tremendous crash of thunder shaking the house. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. I bit back a scream as darkness enveloped me. "The power's out," I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling. "I can't see anything." "Stay where you are," the dispatcher advised. "Officers are still coming. They have your location." In the darkness, the sounds from the hallway seemed magnified. Another thud against the door, the dresser sliding further. The crack between door and frame widened slightly. I could see it even in the gloom, a sliver of deeper darkness. "We're coming in," said the harsh voice. "One way or another." I retreated further into the bathroom, closing that door and locking it as well. 2 barriers now between me and them. But in the pitch blackness, with only the occasional flash of lightning from the small bathroom window for illumination, I felt more vulnerable than ever. A splintering crack from the bedroom, followed by the sound of furniture scraping across the floor. They'd broken through the first door. They were in the bedroom now. "They're in," I whispered to the dispatcher. "They've broken through the bedroom door." "Officers are 5 minutes out," she assured me. "Stay hidden, stay quiet." Footsteps in the bedroom, moving around. The sound of drawers being opened, closet doors sliding. They were searching for something. "Where is it?" the harsh voice demanded. "Where would she keep it?" "Check her desk," the softer voice suggested. "People keep important things in desks." More rummaging sounds. I pressed myself against the bathroom wall, as far from the door as possible. Molly was silent beside me, her body tense, eyes reflecting the occasional flash of lightning. "Nothing here," said harsh voice. "Wait, is that another door? She's in there." Footsteps approached the bathroom door. The handle turned, met resistance from the lock. "Come out," called soft voice. "We won't hurt you. We just need information." I said nothing, clutching the scissors tighter. "Break it," said harsh voice. Another splintering crash as they threw themselves against the bathroom door. It was not as sturdy as the bedroom door had been. It wouldn't hold them for long. "Officers are pulling up to the property now," the dispatcher told me. "They'll be inside shortly. Announce yourself when they call out so they know you're not the intruder." Relief flooded through me. Help was here. If I could just hold out a little longer. Another crash against the bathroom door, the frame beginning to splinter. One more hit would do it. But before that hit came, a new sound cut through the storm. Sirens, faint but growing louder. The men in the bedroom fell silent. "Cops," hissed harsh voice. "You said they wouldn't come. We need to go. Now." Soft voice was no longer gentle. There was genuine fear in his tone. Rapid footsteps retreated from the bathroom door, across the bedroom, into the hallway. Running now, down the stairs. I heard the distant sound of the front door opening, then slamming shut. "I think they're leaving," I whispered into the phone. "I hear sirens. Stay where you are until officers clear the house," the dispatcher instructed. "They'll call out to you when it's safe." I sank to the floor, the adrenaline that had kept me upright suddenly ebbing away. Molly pressed against me, her warm body a small comfort in the darkness. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but for the first time in hours, it wasn't the most terrifying thing in my world. "Police! Is anyone in the house?" The shout came from downstairs, official and authoritative, cutting through the sounds of the storm. Relief washed through me like a physical wave. "I'm upstairs," I called back, my voice cracking. "In the bathroom. The intruders ran out." Heavy footsteps on the stairs, flashlight beams bouncing off the walls as the officers made their way up. I stayed where I was, still clutching the scissors, until a beam of light shone under the bathroom door. "Ma'am, this is Officer Reeves with the County Sheriff's Department. Are you alone in there?" "Yes, just me and my friend's cat. The door's locked, but the men broke the bedroom door to get in." "Okay, I need you to unlock the bathroom door slowly. My partner and I have cleared the rest of the house. The intruders are gone." With trembling fingers, I unlocked the bathroom door and pushed it open. 2 officers stood in the bedroom, flashlights illuminating their uniforms and badges. One was a tall man with a weathered face, the other a woman with short blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. "Are you hurt, ma'am?" the female officer asked, shining her light over me, checking for injuries. "No, I'm okay. They didn't get through the bathroom door before they heard your sirens and ran." "You did the right thing barricading yourself in and calling us," Officer Reeves said, holstering his weapon. "We've got additional units searching the area, but in this storm—" He shook his head. "Visibility is near zero out there." I followed them downstairs, Molly trailing behind us. In the beam of their flashlights, I could see the damage to the house. The bedroom door hanging from one hinge, the dresser shoved aside, drawers from Rebecca's desk pulled out, and their contents scattered across the floor. "Can you tell us what happened?" the female officer asked once we were seated in the living room. Their flashlights provided pools of light in the darkness, the power still out from the storm. I called 911, then called my friend. By the time cops got there, the house was empty and nobody was around. With all the information, it seemed that the intruder was likely a stalker, probably the same one who kept calling. So they tried to trace the phone number, but had no luck. "You said there were 2 men?" Officer Reeves asked, taking notes in a small pad. "Yes, I heard 2 distinct voices, and I saw 2 shadows under the door." "And they were specifically looking for your friend, Rebecca?" "Yes. They kept saying her name, asking if she was here. One of them said she had something that belonged to them." The officers exchanged a glance. "Did they specify what they were looking for?" the female officer asked. "No. They just said it. They searched her desk, like they thought whatever it was might be there." "And your friend is away for the weekend?" "Yes, with her family. I've been trying to reach her, but she hasn't responded yet." Officer Reeves nodded. "Cell reception out here is always bad, especially during storms. We'll need to get in touch with her as soon as possible. There's a chance she knows these individuals or why they might be targeting her. We'll need to take your statement formally," the female officer added. "And we'll want to dust for prints, though they may have been wearing gloves. Most home invaders do these days." It was pretty much left at that. The officers took my formal statement, photographed the damage to the doors, and dusted for fingerprints as best they could given the power outage. They found none, confirming that the intruders had indeed worn gloves. 2 more officers arrived to help search the property, but the storm made it impossible to track the men or find any vehicle they might have used. They promised to increase patrols in the area and left an officer stationed at the house for the remainder of the night, a kindness I deeply appreciated. I feel bad for my friend because whoever those men were, they were definitely stalking her and not me. I don't know if it was just a coincidence that they showed up during the weekend she was gone, or if they were trying to break into what they thought would be an empty home. After all, I never answered the phone, so they probably were confident the house was empty. Finally, around 3 in the morning, Rebecca called me back. The relief in hearing her voice was overwhelming. "Oh my God, are you okay?" she asked, panic evident in her tone. "The police called my parents' house. They said there was a break-in?" "I'm fine," I assured her. "Scared, but fine. Rebecca, do you know who might have done this? They were looking for you specifically. They said you had something that belonged to them." A long pause on the line. "I have no idea," she finally said, but there was something in her voice, hesitation, fear perhaps, that made me wonder if she was being entirely truthful. "They called multiple times before they came," I pressed. "Just saying your name or breathing. They've been watching your house. The police think it might be a stalker." Another pause. "Listen," she said, her voice lower now. "I'll be home tomorrow, first thing. Don't—" Don't look through my things, okay? Just leave everything as it is." The request struck me as odd. The police already went through everything looking for evidence. Of course, that's fine. I'll explain everything when I get home. I'm so sorry you went through this because of me. We said our goodbyes, and I sat on the couch, Molly curled in my lap. The officer stationed outside in his car. The power had come back on, but I left only a single lamp lit, somehow more comfortable in the semi-darkness, now that I knew I was protected. Maybe they were planning to wait and catch her off guard when she eventually got back from vacation. We never found out who they were or what they were doing. The police investigation continued, but without fingerprints or clear descriptions, there wasn't much to go on. The phone number they'd called from was untraceable, a burner phone, the police suspected. Rebecca returned the next day as promised. She was shaken when she saw the damage to her home, but there was something else in her expression as she surveyed her ransacked desk, recognition perhaps, or resignation. "Do you know what they were looking for?" I asked her directly. She avoided my eyes. "I might have an idea. It's complicated. Legal stuff from work. Nothing dangerous." But the way she said it, the way she immediately began going through her desk drawers with trembling hands, told me there was more to the story than she was sharing. I left later that day, our weekend visit cut short by the break-in. Rebecca thanked me for protecting her home, her cat, for being brave in the face of danger. She promised to install a security system, to be more careful. As I drove home, the storm finally clearing to reveal patches of blue sky, I couldn't shake the feeling that Rebecca was hiding something significant. Something that had brought those men to her home, men desperate enough to break in during a severe storm, to stalk her from the shadows. I never stayed at Rebecca's isolated woodland home again. Our friendship cooled in the months that followed, her withdrawal subtle but undeniable. Sometimes I wonder about those men, if they ever came back, if they ever found what they were looking for. And sometimes, during storms, when the rain beats against my windows and thunder shakes the night, I find myself checking the peephole, listening for breathing on my answering machine, watching for shadows under the door. Because the most terrifying truth I learned that weekend wasn't that strangers might break into your home. It was that the people you trust might be the ones who put you in danger in the first place. This was in mid-November of last year, the kind of November where darkness comes too early, and the chill in the air carries whispers of the approaching winter. I remember the exact moment my life began to unravel, sitting in a sterile conference room, the fluorescent lights humming overhead as my manager avoided eye contact. "I'm sorry, but we're implementing company-wide budget cuts," he said, sliding a manila folder across the polished table. "Your position has been eliminated." The words hit me like a physical blow. 5 years at Meridian Marketing, gone in a 10-minute meeting. I cleaned out my desk while former colleagues cast sympathetic glances my way. Some promised to keep in touch. None of them did. Driving home that afternoon, the world looked different, sharper, and more threatening. My apartment, a modest one-bedroom in the Westridge complex, had always felt like a sanctuary. That day it felt like a prison cell where I'd serve my sentence of unemployment. I had some money saved, enough for 3 months if I was careful. The first week passed in a blur of denial and Netflix. By the second week, panic set in. I established a routine. Wake up at 7 a.m., shower, dress as if going to work, and spend 8 hours hunting for jobs online. LinkedIn, Indeed, ZipRecruiter. I created accounts on them all. The silence was deafening. My inbox remained stubbornly empty of interview requests. Each night, I'd lie awake calculating how many days of rent and groceries remained in my dwindling bank account. By week 3, desperation had become my constant companion. I began applying to positions I was overqualified for, willing to take a significant pay cut just to stop the financial bleeding. Still nothing. The apartment started feeling different at night. Every creak of the building settling made me jump. Living alone had never bothered me before, but now the emptiness felt oppressive. I began leaving the TV on while I slept, needing the illusion of company. My neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, noticed the change in me during a chance encounter at the mailboxes. "You don't look well, dear," she said, her arthritic hand resting briefly on my arm. "Is everything all right?" I gave her the sanitized version. She nodded sympathetically and recommended her nephew's construction company. I thanked her and added it to my list of last resorts. Back in my apartment, I stared at my laptop screen until my vision blurred. The rejection emails had started arriving now, form letters expressing appreciation for my interest, but regretfully informing me that other candidates better matched their needs. That's when I decided to expand my search. I discovered job boards I'd never heard of before, sites with bare-bones interfaces and questionable security certificates. One called Job Match Pro caught my attention. The listings seemed legitimate, if oddly specific. I uploaded my resume and applied to 17 positions in one fevered session. For the first time in weeks, hope flickered. That night, I slept dreamlessly, unaware that I had just set something terrible in motion, that I had just invited darkness into my life. The email arrived at 3:47 p.m., nearly 3 weeks after my layoff. I had just finished my 4th cup of coffee, eyes burning from staring at job listings. The notification sound made my heart jump. Subject, interview request. Sales position at NextCore Solutions. I clicked it open immediately, scanning the contents with desperate hope. Dear applicant, I was impressed by your resume and experience. We're looking for someone with your qualifications to join our sales team at NextCore Solutions. Our schedule is extremely tight due to end-of-quarter needs, but I'd like to meet with you tonight if possible. I understand this is short notice, but we need to fill this position immediately. The compensation package is substantial, details attached, and I believe you would be an excellent fit for our team. Please confirm if you're available tonight at 7:30 p.m. Regards, Zach Mercer, Regional Sales Manager, NextCore Solutions. I opened the attachment. The salary was nearly 30% higher than my previous job. My hands trembled as I composed my reply, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt. I hesitated briefly before hitting send. The short notice was unusual. Why tonight? Why so urgent? But the prospect of ending my unemployment nightmare overrode my concerns. I convinced myself that showing flexibility would demonstrate my eagerness and commitment. Zach's response came minutes later, with an address and a confirmation of the time. The location wasn't familiar to me, but Google Maps showed it was about 20 minutes away, in an area with several office parks. I spent the next 2 hours preparing. I rehearsed answers to potential interview questions in the shower. I selected my navy suit, the one that had landed me my previous job. I polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in them. As I knotted my tie, I noticed my hands were steadier than they had been in weeks. The opportunity had energized me, pushing away the cloud of depression that had been my constant companion. I tried researching NextCore Solutions while eating a quick sandwich, but found surprisingly little information. Their website was basic, just a landing page with stock photos of smiling professionals and vague descriptions of business solutions. No employee profiles, no client testimonials. I dismissed my unease as paranoia born from weeks of rejection. The sun was setting as I left my apartment. November darkness fell quickly, and a fog had started to roll in, diffusing the streetlights into hazy orbs. I felt a strange sense of foreboding as I started my car, but pushed it away. This was my chance to get back on track. As I drove, I rehearsed my elevator pitch once more. I'm a results-driven professional with 5 years of experience in competitive markets. The words felt hollow, but they were the currency of the professional world. I had to play the game. The GPS directed me away from the main commercial district toward an area I wasn't familiar with. The buildings became more spread out, the streetlights fewer. I checked the address again, wondering if I had made a mistake. The interview was scheduled for 7:30 p.m. I arrived at 7:15, pulling into the empty parking lot of a small, nondescript building. The structure sat alone, separated from other buildings by a stretch of unkempt lawn. No sign indicated what business operated there, just a street number affixed to the brick facade. All the windows were dark. No cars were visible except mine. I double-checked the address against Zach's email. They matched. Something cold and heavy settled in my stomach as I turned off the engine. The silence was absolute. No traffic noise, no distant conversations, just the tick of my cooling engine and my own increasingly rapid breathing. This wasn't right. This wasn't how a legitimate business operated. I reached for my phone. The phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. "You've reached Zach Mercer. Please leave a message." His voice sounded different than I had imagined, higher, with a peculiar cadence that made my skin crawl. I hung up without leaving a message and tried again. Same result. I checked the time. 7:25 p.m. My interview was supposed to start in 5 minutes. Through my windshield, the building remained dark and silent, a black void against the night sky. Against my better judgment, I decided to investigate. I left my car, the dome light briefly illuminating the parking lot before plunging it back into darkness. The asphalt was cracked, with weeds pushing through like fingers, reaching for the surface. My dress shoes clicked loudly as I approached the entrance, each step echoing in the empty lot. The front door was solid metal, with a small, wire-reinforced window. I cupped my hands around my eyes and peered inside. The interior was pitch black, but I could make out the vague shapes of what might have been a reception area. An abandoned desk, a few chairs, no signs of recent occupation. I tried the door handle. It was locked. Walking around the perimeter, I checked each window. All dark, all showing empty rooms. The building appeared to have been vacant for months, maybe years. My phone rang suddenly, the sound so unexpected in the silence that I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. "Hello," I answered, my voice tight. "Is this the applicant for the next core position?" The voice was male, smooth and professional. "Yes, this is me. Is this Zach?" "Yes, it is. I apologize for the confusion. There's been a last-minute change of venue. We've moved the interview to our main office downtown. Can you make it there in 30 minutes? Something in his tone made my blood run cold. The words were reasonable, but the delivery was wrong. Too rehearsed, too controlled. "I've been trying to call you," I said, stalling. "Reception is poor at my current location," he replied smoothly. "Are you still interested in the position?" I looked back at the abandoned building, then at the empty parking lot surrounding me. Why would a legitimate business direct me to an abandoned building? Why change the venue at the last minute? "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said carefully. "I'm going to have to reschedule." A pause, then, "That would be unfortunate. This opportunity won't be available tomorrow." The pressure tactic was the final red flag. "I understand. Thank you for your consideration." I ended the call and practically ran back to my car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. As I pulled out of the parking lot, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The building stood silent and dark, giving away none of its secrets. On the drive home, my phone rang twice more from the same unknown number. I didn't answer. The familiar streets of my neighborhood had never looked so welcoming. I parked and hurried to my apartment, double-checking that I locked the door behind me. Inside, I loosened my tie and collapsed onto the couch, adrenaline still coursing through my system. What had just happened? Was it an elaborate scam? A setup for a robbery? I couldn't make sense of it. I pulled out my laptop and searched more thoroughly for information about NextCore solutions. Nothing substantial came up, just a handful of generic business directory listings with the same vague description from their website. Next, I searched for Zach Mercer. Again, nothing that matched the person who had contacted me. I checked the email address he had used, zmercernextcoresolutions.com. The domain had been registered just 3 weeks ago. My apartment suddenly felt less safe. I checked the locks again and drew the blinds. For the first time since moving in, I wedged a chair under my front doorknob. I poured myself a beer and turned on the TV, needing the familiar noise to drown out my thoughts. The evening news was covering a series of home invasions in a neighboring county. I quickly changed the channel. Hours passed. The beer helped calm my nerves, but didn't erase the nagging feeling that something was deeply wrong. Around 9:30 p.m., I heard it for the first time, a faint creaking sound from upstairs. At first, I dismissed the sound. Old buildings make noise, pipes expanding and contracting, wood settling, air moving through ducts. This particular apartment complex had been built in the 1980s and had its share of quirks. But as I sat there, the creaking came again. More deliberate this time, more focused. Not the random groans of an aging structure, but something else, something with rhythm and purpose. I muted the TV and listened. For nearly a minute, there was nothing. Then it came again, a slow, careful creak, as if someone was trying to distribute their weight to minimize noise. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. If someone was up there, I just confirmed I was home. Silence answered me. I considered my options. Call the police? What would I tell them? That my ceiling was making noise? They'd laugh me off the line, leave the apartment, and go where exactly? I convinced myself it was nothing, just nerves after a stressful evening. I finished my beer and opened another, hoping the alcohol would dull my hypervigilance. It didn't. Every few minutes, another creak would sound from upstairs. Each time I would freeze, straining to interpret the noise, trying to distinguish between normal house sounds and something more sinister. I checked the time, 10:15 p.m. Despite my anxiety, exhaustion was setting in. The adrenaline crash from the earlier incident, combined with weeks of stress and poor sleep, was taking its toll. "Screw it," I muttered to myself, shutting off the TV. If someone wanted to break in, they wouldn't be upstairs making noise for hours. They would have made their move already. I turned off the downstairs lights and climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. My bedroom was exactly as I'd left it that morning. Bed unmade, closet door closed. Yesterday's clothes draped over the reading chair. I changed into a t-shirt and shorts, brushed my teeth, and collapsed into bed. Despite my exhaustion, sleep didn't come easily. I lay there, listening to the silence, my mind replaying the events of the evening, the abandoned building, the strange phone call, the change of venue. Eventually, my thoughts grew disjointed. My consciousness began to fade. The last thing I remember was the digital clock on my nightstand reading 11:47 p.m. Then, suddenly, I was awake. The room was pitch black. Disoriented, I couldn't immediately recall what had awakened me. My heart was racing, adrenaline flooding my system before my conscious mind understood why. Then I heard it, the same creaking sound, but much closer now. Inside my bedroom, I lay perfectly still, barely breathing, my eyes straining to adjust to the darkness. The sound came again, the subtle shift of weight on the floorboards. Not from upstairs, from the corner of my own room. My eyes finally began to discern shapes in the darkness. The dresser, the reading chair, the closed bathroom door, the closet. As I watched, frozen in terror, the sliding closet door moved. Just an inch at first, then another. The gap widened with excruciating slowness. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My body refused to respond to my brain's frantic commands to run, to scream, to do something. From the widening gap, a figure began to emerge. First a hand, pale and grimy, curling around the edge of the door. Then an arm, clothed in dark fabric. The movement was calculated, almost mechanical, as if the person had practiced this moment countless times. My paralysis broke when a face appeared in the gap. Even in the darkness, I could see the eyes, wide and unblinking, fixed on me with terrible intensity. They reflected what little light was in the room, giving them an inhuman gleam. I lunged for my phone on the nightstand, nearly knocking it to the floor. The figure made no move to stop me or to flee. It simply stood there, half emerged from the closet, watching. My fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled with the screen. I managed to dial 911. As I scrambled out of bed, keeping as much distance as possible between myself and the intruder. 911, what's your emergency? The dispatcher's voice was calm, professional. There's someone in my house, I gasped, backing toward the bedroom door. He was hiding in my closet. I need help now. I gave my address, my voice shaking uncontrollably. The figure still hadn't moved. Its stillness was somehow more terrifying than if it had rushed me. Sir, I've dispatched officers to your location, the dispatcher said. Are you in a safe place? No, I replied, reaching behind me for the doorknob. I'm still in the bedroom with him. Can you safely leave the residence? I'm trying. I found the doorknob and turned it, never taking my eyes off the intruder. As I pulled the door open, the figure finally moved. It was subtle, just a slight tilt of the head, as if curious about what I would do next. I backed into the hallway, then turned and ran down the stairs, taking them two at a time. I heard no pursuit, no footsteps behind me, just silence. The dispatcher's voice continued from my phone. "Sir, are you still there? Are you safe?" "I'm leaving the house now," I said, fumbling with the front door lock. "He's still upstairs." I burst outside into the cool night air, gasping as if I'd been underwater. The street was quiet, houses dark except for a few porch lights. I ran to the curb and looked back at my apartment. No lights had come on. No figure appeared at the windows. The place looked exactly as it always did from the outside. "Officers are 3 minutes out," the dispatcher said. "Stay on the line with me." Those 3 minutes were the longest of my life. I stood under a street light, shivering in my sleeping clothes, watching my apartment for any sign of movement. None came. Finally, the flashing lights of 2 police cruisers appeared at the end of the street. They pulled up to my curb, and 4 officers emerged, hands on their weapons. I directed them to my apartment and explained the situation. 2 officers entered with flashlights and drawn weapons, while the other 2 stayed with me. "How long have you lived here?" one officer asked, his expression professionally neutral. "Almost 3 years," I replied, my teeth chattering from cold and fear. "Any recent disputes with anyone? Ex-girlfriend, neighbor, co-worker?" I shook my head. "No, nothing like that." The officer's radio crackled. "Upper floor clear, checking closets and bathroom." Minutes passed. The radio crackled again. "We've got something. Bedroom closet." The officer beside me spoke into his shoulder mic. "Suspect in custody?" "Affirmative. Male subject, non-resistant. Bringing him out now." We watched as the front door opened. 2 officers emerged, flanking a thin man whose hands were cuffed behind his back. Even from a distance, I could see what the police flashlights revealed: lank, greasy hair hanging over a gaunt face, filthy clothes that hung from his frame, and those eyes, wide, unblinking, now darting around like those of a cornered animal. As they led him to the patrol car, he passed under a streetlight. The sight made my stomach turn. His skin had an unhealthy pallor, as if he hadn't seen sunlight in months. Dark circles ringed his eyes. His lips were cracked and bleeding. But what struck me most was his expression. Not anger, not fear, but a strange, detached curiosity. He stared at me as they put him in the back of the cruiser, his head tilting slightly in that same unsettling manner I'd seen upstairs. He never said a word. The next few hours passed in a blur. I gave my statement to the police, describing the fake job listing, the suspicious interview location, and the discovery of the intruder. They took notes and asked clarifying questions, their expressions growing more concerned as my story unfolded. "You'll need to come to the station tomorrow to give a formal statement," one officer explained. "We'll need access to those emails, too." They advised me not to stay in the apartment that night. I called the only person I could think of, my sister, who lived 40 minutes away. She agreed to come get me immediately. Before leaving, I asked what they had found in my closet. "You don't want to know," the officer said gravely. Then, seeing my expression, he relented. He had a backpack with zip ties, duct tape, a hunting knife, and several syringes filled with what we presume is a sedative. Also, a camera and some other electronic equipment were still cataloging. I felt physically ill. Was he planning to? "We don't know his intentions yet," the officer interrupted. "He hasn't spoken a word since we found him. But whatever he was planning, it wasn't good." My sister arrived shortly after, her face pale with worry. She hugged me tightly, then insisted I pack enough clothes for at least a week. "You're staying with us until this is sorted out," she said firmly. "No arguments." I didn't have the energy to protest. As we drove away, I looked back at my apartment, the place I had called home for years, now transformed into something sinister and threatening. Sleep was impossible that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the closet door sliding open, saw those unblinking eyes staring at me from the darkness. The next morning, I went to the police station as requested. The detective assigned to my case, a woman named Rodriguez with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, showed me what they had discovered. "His name is Derek Marshfield," she said, sliding a mugshot across the desk. It was him, the man from my closet, looking even more disturbing in harsh fluorescent light. "He's been on our radar for a while. But we never had enough to bring him in. What do you mean? I asked. 6 months ago, we got reports of someone using fake job listings to gather personal information, she explained. Then, 3 months ago, a woman reported a break-in where nothing was taken, but she felt someone had been in her home. We found fingerprints that matched Marshfield's, but with no prior record, we couldn't identify him. She tapped her keyboard, bringing up another screen. After we arrested him last night, we searched his residence. What we found was disturbing. She turned the monitor toward me. The screen showed photos of a small, squalid apartment. The walls were covered with papers, printouts of resumes, photos of people entering and leaving buildings, schedules meticulously documented. He created hundreds of fake job listings across dozens of websites, Rodriguez continued. He collected resumes, analyzed patterns of behavior, selected targets based on criteria we're still trying to understand. Targets for what? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. That's where it gets complicated. He doesn't appear to have stolen anything from his previous victims. Nothing sexual either. As far as we can tell, he would break into homes while people were out, hide somewhere inside, and watch them, sometimes for hours, sometimes all night. A chill ran through me. Why? He still isn't talking. The psychologist who evaluated him this morning thinks it might be a form of obsessive voyeurism combined with severe social detachment. He wants to observe people in their private moments, but is incapable of normal human interaction. How many others were there? Before me? Rodriguez hesitated. We've confirmed 17 intrusions over the past year based on evidence in his apartment. We're still identifying and contacting potential victims. The number hit me like a physical blow. 17 homes. 17 people who had no idea a stranger had been lurking in their closets, under their beds, in their attics. There's something else, Rodriguez said, her voice softening slightly. When we searched his backpack, we found a folder with your name on it. Inside was every piece of information he could gather about you. Your previous employment, your daily schedule, photos of you entering and leaving your apartment. And there was a detailed floor plan of your home, noting optimal hiding spots and escape routes. My mouth went dry. How would he know the layout of my apartment? We believe this wasn't his first visit to your home, she said gently, based on the documentation we found. He may have entered your apartment at least twice before while you were out. He was studying you. The revelation left me reeling. All those weeks I'd been alone, desperately searching for a job, he had been watching me, learning my habits, preparing for last night. The days that followed were a nightmare of anxiety and insomnia. I stayed with my sister for 2 weeks, unable to face returning to my apartment. When I finally did go back, accompanied by my sister's husband, everything looked different to me. The closets, the spaces under furniture, the dark corners, all potential hiding places for watching eyes. I broke my lease the following week and moved to a new apartment in a secure building with 24-hour surveillance. I found a new job through a personal connection, never again trusting online listings from sites I didn't recognize. Derek Marshfield was eventually charged with multiple counts of breaking and entering, stalking, and possession of illegal substances. The court ordered a psychiatric evaluation, which determined he was competent to stand trial, but suffering from several severe personality disorders. Throughout the legal proceedings, he never spoke a word about his motives, never explained what he intended to do in those homes, what satisfaction he derived from watching strangers in their most vulnerable moments. That's the question that still haunts me even now. What was he planning to do that night? What would have happened if I hadn't woken up? If I hadn't seen the closet door moving? If I hadn't called 911? I'll never know the answer. And in my darkest moments, I'm grateful for that ignorance. Sometimes at night I still hear creaking sounds in my new apartment. Normal sounds, building sounds. But each time I get up and check every closet, look under every piece of furniture, inspect every possible hiding place. Because now I know that monsters are real. They don't have fangs or claws. They have patient eyes and silent footsteps. They learn your patterns and wait for their moment. And sometimes they slide open your closet door while you're sleeping and watch. I live in the middle of nowhere. It's flat, barren farmland, for miles in all directions. There's a main highway that's not too far from me, but that's about the only paved road around here. Everything else is dirt, or if you're lucky, gravel. Nearest town is 20 minutes away, and it isn't really much of a town. Anyway, I'm 44 and retired, so I spend most of my days at home. Most people don't understand how I could retire so young. The truth is both simple and complicated. I worked in tech for 20 years, riding the wave of a startup that actually made it. When we sold, I walked away with enough to never work again if I lived modestly. 6 months later, a car accident left me with a titanium rod in my leg and chronic pain that made office life unbearable. The settlement from that just padded my nest egg further, so here I am. Young enough to have energy, old enough to feel forgotten by the world, and damaged enough to prefer it that way. My house sits on 40 acres of land that used to be a farm before the soil gave out. I bought it for practically nothing 5 years ago. The previous owners had given up trying to grow anything but debt. The 2-story farmhouse is over a century old, with wooden siding painted a faded blue and a metal roof that amplifies every raindrop into a symphony of tin percussion. It's solid, though, built by people who knew winters out here could kill you if your walls weren't thick enough. This morning, I woke to the sound of rain, which had been falling steadily for a week. The fields surrounding my property had turned into shallow lakes, reflecting the gray sky like dirty mirrors. Inside, the house creaked and settled, speaking its own language of aged wood and rusty pipes. I made coffee in the kitchen while staring out at the muddy expanse that was my front yard. My morning routine never varies much. Coffee, news on the tablet, stretching exercises for my bad leg, more coffee. By noon, the walls were closing in. Cabin fever is real when you live alone in 2,400 square feet of creaking floorboards and empty rooms. I grabbed my cigarettes and headed to the covered front porch, easing myself into the old rocking chair that had come with the place. The rain created a curtain at the edge of the roof, and I watched it fall while smoke curled from my lips into the damp air. That's when I noticed movement on the horizon. At first, it was just a dark spot against the gray backdrop, barely distinguishable through the sheets of rain. But as I squinted, the spot grew larger, taking form. Someone was coming down the long dirt road that led to my house, my private road that stretched nearly a half-mile from the county access road. The isolation out here is complete. No one just passes by. My nearest neighbor is 2 miles away, an elderly farmer named Harris, who I see maybe twice a year. The mail carrier only comes to the box at the end of my drive, never all the way to the house. Pizza delivery won't even come out this far. So the sight of someone deliberately approaching my home sent an instinctive unease crawling up my spine. I leaned forward, my cigarette forgotten between my fingers as I made out the distinctive shape of a motorcycle, some kind of ADV or dirt bike, kicking up rooster tails of muddy water as it powered down my driveway. The rider was hunched forward against the rain, faceless behind a full helmet, the bike weaving slightly on the slick surface. "What the hell?" I muttered, rising from the rocking chair. In this weather, on these roads, somebody on a motorcycle could only be here for one reason. They were coming specifically to my house, but I wasn't expecting anyone. Not today, not ever really. The rider kept coming, the engine's whine growing louder as they approached. I felt the first flutter of real apprehension. Out here, I was on my own. Police response time was measured in quarters of hours, not minutes. I stepped back slightly, keeping to the shadows of the porch. The motorcycle slowed as it approached my yard, then came to a complete stop near my detached garage about 50 feet from the house. The rider didn't dismount. They just sat there, the engine idling, water streaming off their dark clothing. Their helmet turned slowly, scanning the property until the faceless visor locked onto me. We stared at each other across the rain-soaked yard. 10 seconds. 20. The moment stretched like taffy, pulling my nerves taut along with it. I couldn't see their face, couldn't read any intention. They were just a dark shape, watching me from my own driveway. Then, without warning or acknowledgement, they revved the engine, executed a tight turn, and rode back the way they'd come. Within minutes, they had disappeared into the gray distance, swallowed by rain and fog. I stood frozen on the porch long after they'd gone, my cigarette burned down to the filter, unsmoked. What had just happened? Who comes all this way in a downpour just to look at someone and leave? The incident left me unsettled for reasons I couldn't articulate. Nothing had actually happened. Maybe they were lost. Maybe they realized they had the wrong address. Maybe it was someone casing rural properties for a future burglary. That last thought stayed with me as I went back inside, locking the door behind me, something I rarely bothered to do during the day. I tried to shake off the unease as I went about my afternoon. I called my brother Mark, who lives in Chicago, and we talked about nothing important for an hour. He asked about the weather, mentioned his kids' latest accomplishments, complained about work. I didn't tell him about the motorcycle visitor. It would sound like nothing when described, and Mark already worried about me wasting away out here by myself. After our call, I dozed on the couch, the steady drum of rain on the roof lulling me into a fitful sleep. In my dreams, a figure in black circled my house, peering through windows, testing locks, always just out of clear sight. I woke with a start as thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to rattle the windows. Outside, the day had darkened prematurely. My watch showed 7:45 p.m. I'd slept longer than intended, and the storm had intensified while I was unconscious. Lightning flashed, illuminating the living room in stark white for a split second, before plunging it back into shadow. The rain no longer fell. It attacked, pounding against the house like it wanted in. Wind howled through the eaves, finding every loose board and ill-fitted window to whistle through. I made my way to the kitchen, flipping on lights as I went. The old house seemed to groan under the assault of the elements. I put on another pot of coffee, knowing sleep would be difficult with the storm raging. As I waited for it to brew, I gazed out the kitchen window into the impenetrable darkness of my backyard. Another flash of lightning, and I jerked back involuntarily. For a split second, I thought I'd seen a figure standing in the yard, but the darkness returned too quickly to be sure, and I laughed nervously at my own jumpiness. "Get it together," I muttered to myself. "One random visitor, and you're seeing Boogeyman." The coffee finished brewing, and I poured a cup, adding a splash of whiskey for good measure. The warm liquid and alcohol helped steady my nerves as I settled into my armchair in the living room, turning on the TV for company more than entertainment. That's when I heard it, almost imperceptible beneath the cacophony of the storm, but unmistakable to my ears. The distinctive sound of a motorcycle engine approaching through the darkness. The sound of the engine grew louder, confirming I hadn't imagined it. My body tensed instinctively as I set my coffee down and moved to the front window. Peering through a gap in the curtains, I could just make out a single headlight cutting through the rain and fog, moving steadily down my driveway. The same visitor from this afternoon? It had to be. No one else would be out here, especially not in this weather, especially not at night. The coincidence was too great. This was deliberate. My mouth went dry as I watched the approaching light. What kind of person goes motorcycle riding in a thunderstorm after dark? What kind of person returns to a stranger's isolated home hours after an initial visit? Not someone with good intentions, that much was certain. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the scene outside. The motorcycle was halfway down my drive now, moving slower than it had been this afternoon, more deliberate. I could make out the rider's silhouette, hunched forward against the elements. Then something happened that sent ice through my veins. The headlight abruptly went dark. The rider had deliberately turned off their light, plunging themselves into the protective cover of darkness and rain. I pressed closer to the window, straining to see, but it was futile. Between the darkness, the rain, and the fog that had settled into the low areas of my property, visibility was reduced to near zero. I knew the rider was still out there, approaching my home under the cover of night and storm, but I could no longer track their progress. The vulnerability of my position hit me like a physical blow. I was alone in an old house with too many windows and doors, miles from help, being stalked by someone who had taken pains to become invisible. Minutes stretched by as I moved from window to window, searching the darkness. The storm raged on, providing the perfect audio cover for anyone trying to move around my property undetected. Every crash of thunder made me flinch, wondering if it was masking the sound of breaking glass or splintering wood. I tried to rationalize the situation. Maybe it was just some local kid playing a prank. Maybe they were seeking shelter from the storm. But the deliberate nature of it all, the return visit, the doused headlight, spoke of something more sinister. My house suddenly felt like a ship adrift in dangerous waters, vulnerable on all sides. I retreated to the living room, mind racing. Should I call the police and tell them what? That someone might be outside my house? They'd take forever to get here, and I'd feel foolish if it turned out to be nothing. But what if it wasn't nothing? A particularly violent gust of wind slammed against the house, and something banged loudly against the side of the building. I nearly jumped out of my skin before realizing it was probably just the shutter that had been coming loose for months. I needed to get a grip. I needed to be smart about this. First things first, I moved through the house methodically, checking that every door and window was locked. Most were, but I found the back door unlocked, which sent a fresh surge of adrenaline through me. Had I left it that way, or had someone already been inside? I threw the deadbolt with shaking hands. Once I'd secured the house as best I could, I retreated to the kitchen and poured myself another shot of whiskey, downing it in one burning gulp. The alcohol did little to calm my nerves, but it gave me something to do besides panic. That's when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm, squelching footsteps moving through mud, outside the kitchen window. I froze, barely breathing, straining to hear over the rain and thunder. There it was again, the distinctive sound of boots pulling free from sucking mud, followed by the soft thud as they landed again. Someone was walking the perimeter of my house. My heart hammered against my ribs as I slowly backed away from the window. The footsteps continued their circuit, unhurried, deliberate. Whoever was out there wasn't trying to break in, at least not yet. They were studying the house, looking for weaknesses, or perhaps just enjoying the psychological torture of letting me know they were there. Another crash of thunder, and in the momentary silence that followed, I heard something new. A soft scraping against the siding of the house. Was someone trying to pry open a window? Or were they leaving some kind of mark? I needed to see who was out there. I needed some kind of advantage. Moving as quietly as possible, I crept to the hallway closet and retrieved my shotgun from the locked case I kept there. It was a Remington 870, nothing fancy, but reliable. I kept it for hunting and home defense, though I'd never imagined I'd actually need to use it for the latter. My hands trembled slightly as I loaded it, the click of shells sliding into place oddly reassuring. Armed, I felt marginally better, but I still needed information. Who was out there? What did they want? How many were there? I'd only seen one motorcycle, but that didn't mean there was only one person. I moved to the front of the house again, keeping away from windows but trying to get some view of the yard. Lightning flashed, and for a brief moment, the entire property was illuminated in harsh white light. I saw nothing. No motorcycle, no person. But I knew they were there. I could still hear the occasional footstep when the storm momentarily quieted. They were playing with me, moving when I couldn't see, freezing when lightning flashed. It was a calculated game of psychological warfare, and they were winning. Another sound reached me then, the soft creak of my back porch steps. Someone was coming closer to the house, testing entry points perhaps. My grip tightened on the shotgun as a fresh wave of fear washed over me. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait here in the dark, jumping at every sound, wondering when or if they would try to break in. I needed to take some control of the situation. That's when I remembered my truck. It was parked in the attached garage, accessible through a door in the laundry room. The truck had powerful fog lights mounted on the front, lights that could illuminate a significant portion of my property. If I could get to the truck and turn those lights on, I might be able to see who was stalking me. It was risky. Moving to the garage meant potentially making noise that would alert whoever was outside to my movements. It meant temporarily leaving the secure core of the house, but staying put, waiting in fear, seemed worse. Decision made, I moved carefully through the house toward the laundry room. Each step was measured, each floorboard tested before I put my full weight on it. I knew where every creaky spot was after 5 years in this house. but my usual routes were disrupted by my need to stay away from windows. The laundry room was dark when I entered it, the small window admitting almost no light from outside. I fumbled for the light switch, then thought better of it. A sudden light would be visible from outside, alerting my stalker to my location and intentions. Instead, I used the faint illumination from the hallway to find my way to the garage door. With the shotgun tucked under one arm, I grasped the knob and turned it slowly, cringing at the soft click as the latch released. The garage was pitch black and smelled of oil and damp concrete. I eased the door closed behind me before feeling my way toward where I knew my truck was parked. My hip bumped against a workbench, sending a tool clattering to the floor. I froze, listening intently, but the storm outside was too loud for anyone to have heard the noise. Reaching the truck, I carefully opened the driver's side door, trying to minimize the sound. The interior light came on automatically, and I quickly slid inside and closed the door, plunging myself back into darkness. The keys were where I always left them, in the center console. My plan was simple, but dangerous. I would start the truck, hit the garage door opener, pull out quickly into the yard, and turn on all the lights. It would expose me momentarily, but it would also flood the property with light, hopefully catching my stalker in the open. I took a deep breath, inserted the key, and turned the ignition. The truck's engine roared to life, sounding impossibly loud in the enclosed space. There was no going back now. I hit the garage door opener, and with agonizing slowness, the door began to rise. Rain and wind immediately gusted in, and I squinted through the windshield, trying to see if anyone was visible outside. As soon as the door was high enough, I put the truck in drive and rolled forward, emerging from the garage into the storm. Water instantly obscured the windshield before the wipers could clear it. I pulled far enough out to clear the garage, then spun the wheel, turning the truck to face the house. My hand found the light bar switch, and I flipped it on. Suddenly, the entire front of my property was bathed in brilliant white light, cutting through the rain and darkness like a scalpel. And there, caught in the unexpected glare, was a figure standing directly outside my living room window. The sight sent a bolt of pure terror through me. He was dressed all in black, rain streaming off a hooded jacket, and in his right hand was a hammer, raised as if he'd been about to smash the window. For a single frozen moment, our eyes met through the glass, his wide with surprise, mine with horror. Then he was running, sprinting away from the light and around the side of the house. I threw the truck into reverse, backing up to keep him illuminated, but he was fast and clearly knew the layout of my property. He disappeared around the back of the house. I hesitated only briefly before deciding to pursue. Keeping the truck between me and where I thought he might be, I drove around to the back of the house, lights sweeping across the yard. There, about 100 yards away, at the edge of my property where it met an unused field, I caught a glimpse of the motorcycle lying on its side in the tall grass. The man was already astride it, kick-starting it frantically. The engine caught just as my lights found him. He looked back once, his face still indistinguishable at that distance in the rain. Then the bike lipped forward, and he was gone, disappearing into the darkness beyond the reach of my lights. I sat in the truck for several long minutes, engine idling, rain drumming on the roof, trying to process what had just happened. The immediate danger seemed to have passed, but the image of that man, standing outside my window with a hammer raised, was burned into my mind. This hadn't been a mistake. This hadn't been someone lost or seeking shelter. This had been a deliberate attempt to break into my home, and if I hadn't acted when I did, I shuddered, then slowly drove back to the front of the house and into the garage. The storm continued to rage outside, but it now seemed like the lesser threat. Sleep would be impossible tonight. I secured the garage, then moved methodically through the house again, checking locks, closing curtains, positioning myself in the living room where I could see approaches from all sides. With the shotgun across my lap, I prepared for a long night of vigilance, wondering if he would return, and if so, what he would try next. Dawn arrived with agonizing slowness. I had spent the night in a straight-backed kitchen chair positioned in the corner of my living room, shotgun across my lap, eyes burning with fatigue but too wired to close. Every crack of the house settling, every gust of wind against the windows had me jerking to attention, finger twitching near the trigger guard. But he hadn't returned. At least, not that I could detect. The storm had worn itself out around 3 a.m., tapering to a steady drizzle that continued into the morning. As gray light filtered through the curtains, I finally allowed myself to relax marginally. Night hunters rarely continue their pursuits in daylight. My body ached from the hours of tense vigilance. I rose stiffly, muscles protesting, and moved to the window. Pulling the curtain back slightly, I surveyed my property in the wan morning light. Everything looked normal, too normal. The only evidence of the previous night's drama was the churned mud where the motorcycle had been and deep tire tracks from my own truck. If I hadn't seen him with my own eyes, that figure in black with a hammer raised to smash my window, I might have convinced myself it had all been an elaborate nightmare born of isolation and paranoia. But it had been real. Someone had come to my home with the intention of breaking in. Someone had stalked around my house for who knows how long before I spotted them. Someone might still be watching, waiting for another opportunity. I needed to report this. Being self-sufficient was one thing, but this was beyond my capability to handle alone. After making a pot of coffee strong enough to dissolve the spoon, I called the sheriff's office. The dispatcher who answered sounded bored until I mentioned the man with the hammer. "Hold on there, sir," she said, her tone sharpening. "You're saying someone actually attempted to break into your home?" "Yes," I confirmed. "He was standing outside my window with a hammer raised. When I shined lights on him, he ran. And this was last night during the storm. Yes, around 9 p.m. We'll send a deputy out. What's your address?" I gave her the information, and she promised someone would be there within the hour. After hanging up, I took a quick shower, my first movement away from the shotgun since the incident, and changed into clean clothes. The hot water did little to wash away the bone-deep fatigue or the lingering feeling of violation. While waiting for the deputy, I walked my property in the daylight, shotgun still in hand. The ground was saturated, every step creating a sucking sound as mud tried to claim my boots. I followed the motorcycle tracks to where I'd seen the bike lying in the grass. There was indeed a flattened area where it had been, and deep ruts where he'd accelerated away. More disturbing were the footprints circling my house, clear evidence that he had indeed been stalking around for some time before I spotted him. I followed them, reconstructing his movements. He had approached from the road, left his bike hidden in the tall grass, then made a complete circuit of my home, peering in windows, testing doors. Near the back porch, I found something that sent a fresh chill through me. Scratched into the wooden siding, about chest height, was a crude symbol, a circle with an X through it. It looked freshly carved, the exposed wood pale against the weathered blue paint. Was it a mark, some kind of signal, or just the random vandalism of a disturbed mind? I was still staring at this unsettling discovery when I heard a vehicle approaching. Turning, I saw a sheriff's department SUV making its way down my driveway, moving carefully through the mud. The deputy who emerged was young, probably not even 30, with a ruddy face and the cautious demeanor of someone who hasn't yet encountered much real danger in his job. His nameplate read, "Jenkins." "Mr. Mercer?" he called, hand resting casually near his holster as he took in the shotgun I was holding. "That's me," I confirmed, engaging the safety and pointing the barrel at the ground to put him at ease. "Thanks for coming out." He nodded, relaxing slightly. "Dispatcher said you had an attempted break-in last night?" I led him around the property, showing him the motorcycle tracks, the footprints, and finally the strange symbol carved into my siding. As I recounted the events of the previous night, I could see skepticism gradually giving way to concern in his expression. "You live way out here by yourself, Mr. Mercer?" he asked, as we headed back toward the house. "Yes, 5 years now." "Any reason someone might target you specifically? Old grudges, valuable collections, anything like that?" I shook my head. "I keep to myself. Don't have enemies that I know of. And there's nothing particularly valuable here. No art, no big gun collection, nothing worth the trouble." Jenkins frowned, making notes in a small pad. "Could be random. We've had reports of break-ins at isolated properties in the county over the past few months." Usually they hit places that look unoccupied, though. My lights were on, I pointed out. He knew someone was home. The deputy nodded grimly. That's what concerns me. Most burglars avoid occupied dwellings. They want your stuff, not a confrontation. He glanced up at me. This guy came back after seeing you earlier in the day. That shows intent. A chill ran through me at his confirmation of what I'd already sensed. This hadn't been a random target of opportunity. For whatever reason, the man had specifically chosen my home, my isolation. So what happens now? I asked. Jenkins tucked his notepad away. I'll file a report. Have patrols swing by your place when they're in the area. But honestly, Mr. Mercer, we're stretched thin. This is a big county with not many deputies. In other words, I was still on my own. Best advice I can give you is to stay vigilant. Keep your doors locked, and maybe consider some security upgrades. Cameras, motion lights, that sort of thing. And if he comes back, the deputy met my eyes steadily. Call us immediately, but also, his eyes flicked to the shotgun I still held. Texas is a castle doctrine state. You have the right to defend yourself and your property if threatened. It wasn't exactly reassuring, but it was realistic. Out here, help was always going to be too far away to count on in an emergency. After the deputy left, I spent the rest of the day in a haze of exhaustion and lingering anxiety. I checked locks compulsively, startled at small sounds, and kept the shotgun within reach at all times. That night, despite my best efforts to stay awake, fatigue won out. I fell asleep in the armchair around midnight, shotgun still across my lap. I dreamed of a figure in black, walking circles around my house, peering in windows, scratching symbols into the wood. Only in the dream, I was paralyzed, unable to move or call for help, as he tested each entry point methodically, his patience infinite. I woke with a gasp sometime before dawn, my heart pounding. The dream so vivid I had to check the windows to reassure myself no one was actually there. The house was quiet, the land outside still shrouded in pre-dawn darkness. I made coffee, my third pot in 24 hours, and tried to think clearly through the fog of sleeplessness. I needed to be practical. If the man returned, and some deep instinct told me he would, I needed to be better prepared. The shotgun was a last resort, not a security system. As soon as stores opened, I drove into town. The town was really just a cluster of buildings at a crossroads: a gas station, convenience store, a feed supply, a small diner, and a hardware store that had somehow survived the era of big box retailers. It was to this last establishment that I headed. The owner, a leathery man named Cal who had to be pushing 70, nodded a greeting as I entered. Heard you had some excitement out your way, he said without preamble. News traveled fast in small communities. Word gets around, I replied. Jenkins stopped for coffee this morning. Said some drifter tried to break in during the storm. I nodded, not bothering to correct his assumption that it had been a random drifter. I'm looking to upgrade my security. Got any recommendations? For the next hour, Cal helped me select motion-activated floodlights, a basic security camera system, new deadbolts for all exterior doors, and window security bars for the most vulnerable ground floor windows. It was more money than I'd planned to spend, but the memory of that hammer raised to strike my window made the expense seem trivial. Anything else I should consider? I asked as he rang up my purchases. Cal considered for a moment. Got a dog? I shook my head. I'd always been meaning to get one, but somehow never got around to it. Might want to think about it. Best alarm system there is and good company to boot. He leaned forward slightly. Sheriff's got a K9 that just retired. Belgian Malinois named Rex. Handler moved to the city, couldn't keep him. He's at the shelter now, but trained police dogs don't do well there long term. The idea had merit. A trained police dog would certainly be a deterrent, and I had to admit the thought of having another living presence in the house was appealing after recent events. I'll think about it, I promised. By the time I returned home, loaded down with security equipment, it was early afternoon. I spent the rest of the day installing motion lights at strategic points around the property, changing locks, and mounting security cameras. The work was exhausting after my sleepless night, but also therapeutic. Each security measure I added, made me feel marginally more in control of the situation. As dusk approached, I surveyed my handiwork with grim satisfaction. The property was now ringed with motion sensors that would trigger bright lights if anything larger than a raccoon moved within 50 feet of the house. The new deadbolts were substantial enough that breaking through them would require serious effort and create significant noise. The cameras weren't professional grade, but they provided basic surveillance of all approaches to the house. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than nothing. As darkness fell, I found myself once again positioned in the living room, shotgun at hand, watching and waiting. But this time, I had technology on my side. A tablet on the coffee table displayed the feeds from my newly installed cameras, allowing me to monitor the perimeter without moving from spot to spot. The night passed without incident. Around 3 a.m., a motion light triggered, sending my heart rate skyrocketing until I saw the culprit on the camera feed, just a coyote trotting across the yard, pausing to stare curiously at the sudden illumination before continuing on its way. By morning, I was exhausted, but triumphant. My security measures worked, and there had been no sign of the mysterious motorcyclist. Perhaps he had moved on to easier targets. Perhaps the deputy's visit had scared him off. Perhaps one sleepless night of vigilance had been enough. But as I finally allowed myself to fall into a deep recovery sleep that morning, one thought nagged at the edges of my consciousness. What if he was just biding his time, watching, waiting for me to lower my guard? 3 days passed without incident. Each night I maintained my vigil, though I allowed myself short catnaps as exhaustion demanded its due. Each morning, I reviewed the camera footage, finding nothing more threatening than the occasional wildlife. The motion lights triggered several times each night, but always due to innocent causes: wind-blown debris, animals, once even a tumbleweed rolling across the yard like some cliché from an old western. Gradually, I began to relax. Perhaps it had been a one-time thing after all. Perhaps the intruder had been scared off by my show of force with the truck and lights. Perhaps he'd found easier pickings elsewhere. On the 4th day, I drove back into town. The visit had a dual purpose: to replenish my dwindling supplies and to inquire about the retired police dog Cal had mentioned. The shelter was a small, cinder-block building behind the volunteer fire station, run primarily by the fire chief's wife, a no-nonsense woman named Martha. When I asked about Rex, her expression softened slightly. "He's a good boy," she said, leading me to a kennel at the back. "But he needs the right home. Not just anyone can handle a dog with his training." Rex was an imposing animal, lean and muscular with the characteristic tan coat and black face of his breed. When Martha approached his kennel, he stood at attention, alert but calm, his intelligent eyes assessing me without aggression. "He's 7, Martha explained. "Still plenty of working years left, but the department couldn't justify keeping him after his handler left. Budget cuts." She said this last bit with undisguised disapproval. I crouched down to Rex's level, letting him sniff my hand through the chain-link fence. What kind of training does he have? Full police work, tracking, apprehension, area search. He's not an attack dog per se, but he's trained to detain suspects and protect his handler. She eyed me speculatively. "Jenkins mentioned your break-in attempt. Rex would definitely be a deterrent to anyone thinking about trying that again." The idea of having a trained guardian, especially one with acute senses that would alert me to danger long before I noticed it myself, was deeply appealing. After some discussion about Rex's needs and my ability to meet them, plus signing a stack of paperwork, I found myself driving home with a Belgian Malinois, riding calmly in the passenger seat. Rex adapted to my home with surprising ease. He explored the house methodically, seeming to catalog every room, every potential entry point. When I showed him the perimeter of the property, he paid special attention to the areas where the intruder had been, his nose working overtime as he processed the lingering scents. That night, with Rex patrolling the house silently, I slept better than I had since the incident. His presence was reassuring in ways I hadn't anticipated. Every few hours, he would make a circuit of the house, checking windows and doors before returning to lie at the foot of my bed, alert even in rest. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to truly believe that the danger had passed. That belief lasted until the next afternoon. I was in the kitchen, preparing a late lunch, when Rex suddenly stiffened, his ears pricking forward, a low growl rumbling in his chest. He moved to the back door, his posture alert, focused on something outside that I couldn't see or hear. My blood ran cold. I immediately retrieved the shotgun from where it now lived, propped in a corner of the kitchen, and moved to the tablet that displayed my security camera feeds. At first, I saw nothing unusual. Then, at the edge of one frame, movement caught my eye. Someone was on my property, moving through the tall grass beyond my yard, staying just at the range where the camera's resolution made identification difficult. It was him. It had to be. The build, the dark clothing. It matched what I remembered of the intruder from the stormy night. He was back, and this time he was being careful to stay just out of clear view. Rex's growl deepened, and he looked back at me, awaiting command. In just the few days we'd been together, we'd developed a surprising rapport, his police training making him responsive to even my untrained signals. "Stay," I ordered quietly, not wanting to give away our awareness of the intruder's presence. I watched the camera feed intently. The figure moved with purpose, circling the property at a distance, stopping occasionally to observe the house. He seemed to be studying the new security measures I'd installed, noting the placement of cameras and lights. This wasn't the behavior of someone who had randomly targeted my home. This was reconnaissance. He was planning another attempt. My first instinct was to call the sheriff's office, but what would I tell them? That someone was walking near my property but not actually trespassing? That would hardly warrant sending a deputy all the way out here. No, I needed more than that. I needed to catch him in the act, or at least get clear evidence of his intentions. An idea formed, dangerous, perhaps foolish, but potentially effective. If I could lure him closer, get him on camera clearly enough for identification, that might be enough for the authorities to take serious action. The question was how to do that without putting myself at unnecessary risk. Rex whined softly, still fixated on the unseen threat outside. His training and instincts told him something was wrong, even if he didn't yet understand what I wanted him to do about it. "It's okay, boy," I murmured, my mind racing. "We'll deal with this." I watched as the figure completed a full circuit of my property, always staying just at the edge of clear visibility. Then, with the same deliberate pace, he retreated the way he had come. By the time I thought to check other camera angles, he had disappeared entirely. But I knew he'd be back. This visit had been about planning. The next would be about execution. That night, I set a trap. I deliberately left one window partially open, the small bathroom window on the ground floor, which was too small for a person to enter but large enough to suggest vulnerability. Then, I positioned a camera with a clear view of that window, hidden in the shower plants I kept on the sill. If he approached that window, I'd have him on video, clear evidence of his intent. With Rex at my side and the shotgun close at hand, I settled in for another night of vigilance. Hours passed without incident. The motion lights triggered twice, once for a rabbit, once apparently from a strong gust of wind moving a branch. Each time Rex and I went on high alert, only to stand down when the cause proved innocent. Around 2 a.m., fatigue began to take its toll. Despite my best efforts, my eyelids grew heavy. Rex remained vigilant, however, his body tense, ears constantly adjusting to pick up sounds beyond my human hearing range. I must have dozed off briefly because the next thing I knew, Rex was on his feet, a deep growl rumbling in his chest, his attention fixed on the back of the house. Fully alert instantly, I checked the security feeds. Nothing visible on the cameras. But Rex's behavior told me all I needed to know. Someone was out there. Had the intruder somehow detected the cameras? Was he being careful to stay in the blind spots? Moving silently, shotgun ready, I followed Rex through the darkened house as he tracked whatever he was sensing. He led me to the bathroom, the one with the deliberately opened window. And then I heard it, the softest scraping sound, metal against wood, coming from outside the window. Someone was there, testing the opening. Rex's growl deepened, and I placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. Not yet. I needed evidence first. The scraping continued, more deliberate now. I could picture what was happening. the intruder using some tool to widen the opening, checking if the window could be fully opened from outside. I took a calculated risk. Reaching up, I flipped on the bathroom light. The scraping stopped instantly. Through the partially open window, I could hear rapid breathing, then the sound of retreating footsteps, someone moving quickly away from the house. I checked the hidden camera feed on my phone, hoping it had captured a clear image, but my heart sank. The angle was wrong. I could see an arm, part of a shoulder, but nothing that would serve as identification. The intruder had been careful, intuitive enough to approach from the exact angle that would minimize exposure to the camera. This wasn't some opportunistic burglar. This was someone with experience, someone methodical. Rex whined, eager to pursue, but I held him back. Chasing an unknown intruder into the darkness was a fool's errand, especially when they might be armed. Instead, I secured the bathroom window properly and performed another check of all entry points. Everything was locked tight. The intruder had been foiled again, but for how long? This cat-and-mouse game couldn't continue indefinitely. Eventually, one of us would make a mistake. I just had to make sure it wasn't me. The next morning, I drove into town again, this time to the sheriff's office. I brought the security footage with me, limited as it was, and reported the second attempted intrusion. Deputy Jenkins reviewed the footage with a frown. "Not much to go on," he admitted. "Can't make out a face or even confirm it's the same person from the first attempt." "It's him," I insisted. "Same build, same methodical approach. He's been watching my place, learning my routines, studying my security setup." Jenkins leaned back in his chair, considering. "Look, Mr. Mercer, I believe you. But believe doesn't get me a warrant or an arrest. We need something concrete." "So what am I supposed to do? Wait until he actually breaks in? Until I'm forced to defend myself?" The deputy sighed. "I'll increase patrols past your property, but honestly, that's about all I can officially do at this point." He hesitated, then lowered his voice. "Off the record, these situations sometimes require creating opportunities. If you understand what I'm saying." I understood perfectly. He was suggesting I create a scenario where the intruder would be forced to reveal himself more clearly, to commit more definitively, to an illegal act that would justify intervention. It was dangerous advice, but it might be my only option. On the drive home, I formulated a plan. It was risky, potentially even reckless, but the alternative, living indefinitely under siege, was worse. I would make it appear that I was leaving the property for a day or two. I would make it obvious, loading luggage into my truck, driving away. But in reality, I would double back on foot through the fields, approaching my own property from the rear, where no one watching the road would see me. Rex and I would hide in the house, lights off, and wait. If the intruder had indeed been watching my routines, he would likely seize the opportunity of my apparent absence to make his move. And when he did, I would be ready, with cameras recording, with Rex at my side, and with the full legal right to defend my property. It was a trap, plain and simple. But sometimes, the only way to catch a predator is to offer bait. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I packed a visible suitcase, loaded it into my truck, and even left a lamp on inside that would suggest habitual precaution while away. Then I drove off, taking the main road as if headed to town. But instead of continuing, I turned off on a little used farm track about a mile from my property. I parked the truck behind an abandoned barn where it wouldn't be visible from the road, then began the hike back to my house, cutting across fields and staying low where the land dipped. Rex trotted silently beside me, clearly enjoying what he perceived as some kind of working exercise. His police training made him perfect for this kind of covert approach. He remained utterly silent, alert but controlled. It took nearly 2 hours to circle around to the back of my property without exposing ourselves. By the time we slipped in through a rear door, I'd deliberately left unlocked for this purpose. The sun was high in the sky. Inside, I secured the door behind us, then moved through the house, checking that everything was as I'd left it. Nothing had been disturbed. If the intruder had observed my departure, he hadn't made his move yet. Now came the waiting game. I positioned myself in the master bedroom closet. which offered a view of both the front and back of the property through small windows. Rex lay at my feet, his body relaxed, but his senses clearly engaged, ears swiveling to track sounds I couldn't detect. Hours passed. The sun began its westward descent, shadows lengthening across my property. Still nothing. Had I miscalculated? Had the intruder not been watching after all? Or was he just being cautious, waiting until full darkness before making his move? As dusk approached, my doubt began to grow. Perhaps this had all been an exercise in paranoia. Perhaps the repeated visits had been coincidence, or even figments of an isolated mind seeking drama in the monotony of rural life. But Rex didn't think so. As the light failed, his posture changed, becoming more alert, his muscles tensing subtly. He sensed something I didn't. And then, just as twilight deepened toward true night, I saw movement on one of the camera feeds displayed on my tablet. A figure moving with purpose down my driveway. The intruder had arrived. The figure moved with confidence now, no longer bothering to hide at the edges of the property. He clearly believed the house was empty, that I was miles away, unaware of his presence. This time I could see him clearly on the security feed. He wore dark clothing, not quite tactical gear but close, and a backpack that likely contained tools. His face was partially obscured by a neck gaiter pulled up over his nose, but his eyes were visible, scanning the house methodically as he approached. Rex tensed beside me, a nearly inaudible growl vibrating in his chest. I placed a hand on his shoulder, silently commanding him to stay still. Not yet. I needed the intruder to commit fully, to provide undeniable evidence of his criminal intent. The man reached the front porch and paused, listening. After a moment, he tried the door handle, locked, of course. Instead of attempting to force it, he moved to a front window, the one I had deliberately left with a visible gap in the curtains. He peered inside, checking for movement. Finding none, he circled to the side of the house, disappearing from one camera view only to appear on another. He was being thorough, checking each potential entry point, assessing risks and opportunities. When he reached the back door, he paused again, this time removing his backpack and extracting something from it. A tool of some kind. I couldn't make out the details on the night vision camera. He began working on the lock. That was it. The clear evidence I needed. This was unmistakably breaking and entering, not some ambiguous lurking that could be explained away. I raised my phone, ready to call the sheriff's office, but hesitated. By the time they arrived, this could all be over, one way or another. Better to gather more evidence first, to ensure there would be no possibility of him escaping consequences. On the security feed, I watched as he manipulated the lock with practiced movements. This wasn't his first break-in. After about a minute of work, I saw his shoulders relax slightly. He'd succeeded. The back door opened slowly, and he slipped inside my house. Rex's muscles bunched under my hand, his entire body vibrating with the effort of remaining still when all his training urged him to act. I leaned down, whispering in his ear, "Soon, boy, very soon." From my position in the upstairs closet, I could hear the intruder moving through my kitchen below. Soft footsteps, careful but confident. The occasional creak of a floorboard, the sound of drawers being gently opened and closed. He was searching for something. But what? The house didn't contain valuables worth this level of persistence and risk. I heard him move from the kitchen to the living room, his footsteps occasionally pausing as he examined something. Was he looking for cash, electronics, or something more specific? The uncertainty gnawed at me. This wasn't right. This wasn't a normal burglary. The repeated visits, the reconnaissance, the timing, it all spoke of something more targeted than opportunistic theft. A horrible thought occurred to me. What if this wasn't about stealing at all? What if it was about me? Before I could pursue that disturbing line of thinking, I heard the intruder begin to climb the stairs. He was coming up to where Rex and I were hidden. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. Once he was fully committed, once he'd entered the bedroom, I would confront him. With Rex at my side and the shotgun as backup, I had the advantage. I would hold him at bay while calling the authorities. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs, paused, then continued down the hallway toward the master bedroom. Rex's growl deepened, and I tightened my grip on his collar. Just a few more seconds. The bedroom door swung open. From my position in the partially open closet, I could see the intruder silhouetted against the hallway's emergency light. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, surveying the room, then stepped inside. As he turned toward the closet, I released Rex with a single command. Apprehend. The Malinois exploded from our hiding place like a fur-covered missile, crossing the room in a blur of motion. Before the intruder could react, Rex had clamped down on his arm, driving him to the floor with the force of the impact. The man cried out in pain and surprise, thrashing against Rex's hold. But the dog was expertly trained. He maintained his grip without causing serious injury, effectively pinning the intruder in place. I emerged from the closet, shotgun leveled. Don't move, I commanded, my voice steadier than I felt. Rex is a retired police K-9. He's trained to maintain that hold until I tell him otherwise and to escalate if you resist. The intruder froze, his eyes wide with shock and fear above the gator. In the dim light from the emergency lights, I could finally see those eyes clearly, pale, maybe blue or gray, with a distinctive web of wrinkles at the corners. They were the eyes of a man in his 50s or older, not some young thrill-seeker. Who are you? I demanded. Why are you in my house? Instead of answering, he suddenly jerked, his free hand moving toward his waistband. Rex immediately responded, adjusting his grip and applying more pressure. The man yelped in pain. I wouldn't, I warned, taking a step closer. Next time he won't be so gentle. Now, I'm going to ask you again. Who are you and why have you been stalking my property? The intruder breathed heavily, his gaze darting between me, Rex, and the door, calculating his chances, finding them poor. Finally he spoke, his voice muffled by the gator but surprisingly cultured. You don't recognize me, do you, Mercer? The use of my name sent a chill through me. This confirmed what I'd begun to suspect. This wasn't random. I was the target. Should I? I kept the shotgun steady, trying to place the eyes, the voice, but finding no recognition. The man gave a short, bitter laugh. I suppose not. You ruined my life without even knowing my name. Why would you remember my face? Confusion and unease mingled in my gut. I don't know what you're talking about. Remove the gator, slowly. With his free hand, he pulled down the neck gaiter, revealing a face I still didn't recognize. Weathered, lined, with several days' worth of gray stubble. His mouth was set in a tight line of hatred. Still nothing, he sneered. The name Victor Crane mean anything to you? The name hit me like a physical blow. Suddenly, I was back 5 years ago in my previous life, testifying in a federal court about security vulnerabilities I'd discovered in a financial software system. The system had been developed by a company called Crane Technologies. You're related to Victor Crane? I asked, trying to place this man in that context. I am Victor Crane, he spat. Or what's left of him after you destroyed everything I built. Memories flooded back. Victor Crane had been the CEO of a mid-sized tech company specializing in financial software. My company had been hired to audit their security protocols before a major bank adopted their system. What I found had been alarming. Deliberate backdoors, hidden access points that could be exploited. Not coding oversights, but intentional vulnerabilities. I'd reported my findings, as was my ethical and legal obligation. The fallout had been significant. The bank pulled out of the deal. Other clients followed suit. Federal investigations were launched. Crane Technologies collapsed, and Victor Crane himself faced criminal charges for fraud. You, I said slowly, were building software with deliberate security flaws. You were setting up your clients for theft or extortion. I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourself. I was building an empire. Crane's face contorted with rage. One that would have made me wealthy beyond imagination once the vulnerabilities were exploited. Then you came along with your self-righteous ethics and took it all away. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Crane had tracked me down after his release from prison. He'd found my isolated home and studied it, planning not a burglary but revenge. So what was your plan here? I asked, even though I suspected I knew the answer. Break in and murder me in my sleep? Make it look like a burglary gone wrong? Crane's eyes narrowed. I wanted you to suffer first, to know it was me, to understand why. The hammer wasn't just for breaking windows. A chill ran through me at the calculated hatred in his voice. This man had been planning my torture and murder, meticulously working out the details over multiple visits to my property. Well, that plan has failed, I said firmly. Rex, hold. The dog maintained his grip while I retrieved my phone from my pocket. I'm calling the sheriff now. You're going back to prison, Crane? As I dialed, he spoke again, his voice taking on an unsettling calm. This isn't over, Mercer. You think prison scares me? I've already been there. I'll serve my time for breaking and entering, maybe attempted assault, a few years at most. And when I get out. He left the threat hanging, but his meaning was clear. He would try again. Add threatening bodily harm to the charges, I told the dispatcher who answered my call. After explaining the situation, I was assured deputies were on their way. While we waited, Crane and I remained in a tense standoff. He occasionally tested Rex's hold, only to be reminded of the dog's training with a growl and increased pressure. Mostly, though, he just stared at me with cold hatred, occasionally murmuring comments about how we would meet again and how patient he could be. His calm certainty was more unsettling than rage would have been. This wasn't a hot-blooded crime of passion. This was calculated, years in the planning. Prison might interrupt his plans, but it wouldn't end them. When the deputies finally arrived, lights flashing at the end of my driveway, I felt relief, but not resolution. They took Crane into custody, photographed the evidence of breaking and entering, and took my statement. Throughout the process, Crane maintained that unnerving calm, his eyes never leaving me, his expression promising future retribution. As they prepared to take him away, Deputy Jenkins pulled me aside. Mr. Mercer, given the nature of this situation and the suspect's clear fixation on you, I'd strongly advise considering relocation. Someone this determined. Restraining orders and prison sentences only buy time. They don't solve the problem. I nodded slowly, the reality of my situation sinking in. My isolated paradise had become a vulnerability. My self-sufficient lifestyle, a liability when faced with someone dedicated to causing me harm. I'll think about it, I promised, though in truth the decision had already crystallized in my mind. Later that night, after the deputies had gone and the house was secured once more, I sat on my front porch with Rex at my feet. The rain had finally stopped, and stars speckled the clear sky above. In the distance, coyotes called to one another, their yips and howls carrying across the empty fields. I had come here seeking peace, isolation, a place to heal after my accident and to enjoy the wealth I'd earned. Instead, I'd found that isolation cuts both ways. It provides freedom but also vulnerability. It offers escape from the world's chaos, but also from its protections. Victor Crane had found me once. He would find me again if given the chance. His hatred had become his purpose, his revenge the axis around which his life now turned. Prison wouldn't change that. It would only delay the inevitable. The decision wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I would sell this place, move somewhere less isolated, somewhere with neighbors close enough to hear a cry for help, with police response times measured in minutes rather than half hours. Somewhere Crane wouldn't expect to find me when his sentence ended. It wouldn't be the same. I would miss the open spaces, the silence, the self-reliance, but I would adapt. We humans always do. Rex nudged my hand with his nose, his warm presence a reminder that I wouldn't face this transition alone. I scratched behind his ears, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought him into my life just when I needed him most. "What do you think, boy?" I asked softly. "Ready for a new adventure?" His ears perked up at the question, and I could almost imagine he understood. Whatever came next, we would face it together. The coyotes called again, their voices echoing across the empty fields. Soon, those calls would no longer be the soundtrack to my nights. Instead of regret, I felt a surprising sense of anticipation. Life had become too comfortable out here, too predictable. Perhaps this enforced change would lead to new opportunities, new experiences I would otherwise have missed. As the stars wheeled overhead, I made peace with what needed to be done. The middle of nowhere had been my refuge. But now it was time to rejoin the world, a wiser, more cautious version of myself, but still moving forward. Sometimes the threat of darkness is what finally drives us back toward the light.